I've just taken my driver and hit 2 tee shots off this 17th hole, and you can see them on the screen at the moment. Now I would say, and hopefully you'll agree, those swings look quite similar, almost identical, but there was a big difference. If I show you those swings again, but this time with some data that was taken using the blast sensor that you can see here on the end of my golf club, that just comes through an app on my phone, and you'll see that the swing on the left, I was hitting down on the ball, and the swing on the right, I was hitting up on the ball. Now the swing on the right, that gives me a much greater chance of hitting the ball further, quite considerable distance that I'm gaining from that swing on the right. If you have a look at the chart on the bottom here, this is taken from TrackMan, and we're just using this for a 95-mile-an-hour club speed. Some of you will be higher, some of you will be lower, but just look at the difference in potential distance when we hit down by 5 degrees and when we hit up by 5 degrees. Big difference. So if you're hitting down on the driver, or even if you're hitting pretty level, you're potentially leaving distance on the table. You're not hitting the ball as far as you could. So in this video, we're going to be showing you how you can make sure that you're hitting up on the golf ball, and that is, for an amateur golfer looking to squeeze as many yards as you can at the driver, it's essential that you work on hitting up on the ball. So we're going to go through the right way, the wrong way, and some of the mistakes I see golfers make, and then obviously we're going to give you some drills and some exercises to help you do it in practice, and ultimately how we hit on the golf course. So let's begin with setup. We have to get the setup right if we're looking to hit up on the ball. I've got my driver and I want the ball teed up nice and high. If I tee it super low, it's going to make everything a lot more difficult. So we want, around about half the ball above the top of the club head. That's a great starting point. Then we need to build our stance around that golf ball. So when I set up to this ball, the ball is much further up in my stance, very close to the inside of that lead heel. I've also got a stance width which is slightly wider than it would be with, let's say, an 8 or a 7 or even a 6 iron. That wider stance is really important because what it does, it moves me, the upper body, more behind the golf ball. Have a look at where my buttons are relative to the ball. If I narrow my stance, they become a lot more in line with that ball. So having the ball forward is important, but then we make that slightly wider stance which sets your buttons much more behind it. So I want my buttons to be roughly middle of my heels, which will leave them, some good 6, maybe 10 inches behind the golf ball. So straight away, setting up in this fashion here gives me a much greater chance of hitting up on the ball. Doesn't guarantee it, I can still change that, but it gives me a much better starting point. Some of the faults that I see: stance too narrow, upper body too far forward, maybe the ball is too far back. From this setup, it becomes very difficult to achieve an upward hit. So let's make sure we get the right setup. Now, when we look at hitting up on the ball, telling a golfer or going to the driving range and just trying to hit up on it isn't enough, because there's a right way and a wrong way. Obviously, the best players in the world tend to do it the right way. Potentially, you might be doing it the wrong way. Just look what happens if I take a setup to this golf ball, and I'm going to rehearse a swing, and I'm going to leave my weight on my back leg, and I'm going to release the club very early. So you can see how the club is sort of passing my hands. Now what happens here is that you can see how the club head would be moving sort of upwards into that ball. So that would sort of tick that box of it's an upward hit. But look at the loft that's on my driver. I'm increasing it considerably. So you can see how my hands are back, and my club head, which is around about 9 degrees, is maybe something closer to 15, 20. So what's going to happen is, yes, I'm going to hit up on the ball, but I'm going to hit up on it and it's just going to go straight up into the air, and it's probably going to have a lot of spin as well. So it's going to have that kind of high, spinny ball flight, which, lands and doesn't really roll anywhere. So that's not really the best way. Again, I'm going to slightly exaggerate this, but what the best players in the world do is they will be delivering less loft, much closer to the loft that's on the club head. Generally a little bit more than that, but closer to that. But what they do is they deliver that loft with the club moving, as you can see, in this kind of upward fashion. So the club head is still traveling upwards, but I'm presenting a better loft. What that does is it gets the ball to launch really nice and high, but it controls the spin. Rory McIlroy probably does this better than anybody else on the planet right now. So he gets a really high launch, but the ball goes through the air on a phenomenal flight, and that's how he's able to, squeeze almost every last yard out of his drives. That's what we're going to teach you to do. So how do we get that moving? How do we get that happening? Well, we're going to go through some really key points, and then we're going to go through some little drills and some exercises. So what causes the club head to travel up? Well, it's not the fact that the club is passing the hands. That would cause the club to travel up, but as I said, that's wrong. The reason the club head travels up is because there's lots of things happening through impact. The lead shoulder should be moving up away from the golf ball. And as you can see, as it does that, that causes the club head to have this sort of upward movement. So we need this lead shoulder to be moving up and around. We would also find that the lead leg, so for me that's my left leg, as we start down is going to have some flex. But as we get towards delivery position and impact, we start to use that left leg and we start to push. So that starts to straighten my leg, it starts to raise my lead hip, and that's starting to push away from the ground. Again, if we're pushing away from the ground, that's going to help the golf club move also up and away from the ground. So those movements help the club head move up. We therefore don't need to be doing this in order to get the golf club up. And that is probably the number one fault that I see with golfers trying to hit up on the ball, is that they don't use the body, they simply use a flicking of the wrists. And they achieve what they want. They get the club working up, but it doesn't give them the extra distance. So here's a couple of exercises that I want you to do, and there's going to be a couple of little visuals that we work on as well. And these are great, and we're also going to give you a little practical drill. So we're going to take an alignment stick. You're going to get yourself set up, and you're going to place it into the ground at an angle. Doesn't really matter what the angle is, but you want that stick about opposite your trail thigh. Now I'm going to take a setup here, and I'm going to make my backswing, and I'm going to start and make a downswing where I feel like I put some pressure through that lead side. So I feel like I'm pushing into the ground, I'm almost increasing the flex of my body, and I'm going to move my hands down to the point where I could grab this alignment stick. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to rotate through to my finish and pull the alignment stick out of the ground. The key is to pull that with my body. What I don't want you to do is go to here and then pull the alignment stick. Because you see what that does, yes, I could pull it out of the ground, but really static in the body. And if you watch any poor drivers of the golf ball, very often we see that really static body and lots of hands and arms. If we can't use the arms, what do we have to use? We have to use those movements that we've discussed a moment ago. So here's the little exercise and how it would look. We take a setup, we make a backswing, we work down into the lead side, we collect the stick, and then we work through to the finish. And I want to make that move almost as aggressive as I can. And if you have a look at what my lead foot is doing as I do that, okay, so just watch my lead foot. It moves because I'm really using the pressure that I've built up on that lead side to push up and away. And if I do that with enough aggression, there's not going to be a lot of weight going through that left foot as I do that, and it's going to start to rotate. That's a great feeling for you. So we're working into the ground, and then we're using that pressure, that force, to move up and away from the ground. That's going to get the club head moving up. Here's another little analogy, and I'm probably going to look a little bit silly doing this, but again, I'd love you to do this wherever you're watching this. Probably not many people around, because you will also feel a little bit silly. Get yourself into a setup position and try and imagine you're into this delivery position here. I feel very loaded, okay? Now imagine I'm standing against a wall, and that wall is kind of facing me. And I said to you, right, I want you to touch as high on that wall as you can with your trail hand. So you're going to try and jump and reach as high as you can. Again, a very similar idea to what we want to be doing in the golf swing. So if I did that now, we're going to go up, we build that pressure through that lead side, and if I visualize that wall there and I had to touch that wall, what would I do? Well, I'd have to jump and rotate. Looks a bit silly, it's a little extreme, but again, it's the same ideas. Because the two things that we need through impact with the driver is we need rotation. Well, I need rotation because the wall is over here, and I need some vertical push. That's where the jumping element comes in. So again, a little idea, and very often it's those little key triggers that really allow you to unlock some movements in the golf swing. Because during my coaching, what I've often found is that we do these little drills, and the feedback from a player is, do you know what, it never entered my head that that's what I should be doing through the golf ball. I've never created that feel before. But what we can then do is introduce the golf club and start to sort of think, okay, what's that movement? It's that movement through the golf ball, that little push up and that jump. Now, the other thing that's really going to help, and you'll see this with great players, is very, very often with the driver, you will see a little bit through the ball of the head moving backwards this way. Okay? Now, I'd almost guarantee that these players are not trying to move their head backwards, but by taking a slightly wider stance, having a little bit more upper body tilt, having this pressure into that left side, and then the push pushes these golfers up, but also a little bit back. Now, I don't want you to feel or intentionally move your head back, but if you're starting to make these movements, you're starting to increase the force and the power, try and hit up on the ball. If when you're doing that, you feel a little bit like your head's going back, it's fine, absolutely fine. What I don't want you to do is search for some of the feelings that you might have when you're hitting an iron shot. This is a different club, it's a driver. We very often have different movements, different sensations. We actually want different things to be happening through the golf ball. So those little exercises, those little drills, a simple head cover can give you the feedback that you need. Depends on the size of your head cover, but I'm going to take that, I'm going to put it around about, that's just less than a foot in front of the golf ball. You can see that's probably, just over 2 club head widths. And the idea here is that I'm going to hit some shots and use those ideas and those feels to get the club to work up over the head cover. But doing that whilst controlling the loft. Remember, we're never looking to flick the club past the hands to achieve this. So, got the little blast sensor on. So we'll see the data on the screen here. For me, 4 to 5 degrees up is what I'm looking for with the driver. And if I achieve that, the head cover should still be in one piece. Well, I wouldn't have that drive back. That's perfectly around the corner. And data on my phone shows, there we go, perfect. You can see that attack angle, nice and positive. That's what I need. That's going to give me the best flight. Head cover stayed in place. So this is my little setup to assess it. But the drills that we do before that is how you're going to create the right movements. Because trust me, hitting up on the driver is going to get you to hit it further without any more swing speed, and that is crucial to lowering your scores.